Hello. Once again this week I got a couple of phone calls that I thought were worth sharing with you. The first relates to your AVID and specifically the delivery of your AVID during your transaction. Now, as you know, the statutes of the state of California only require you to use a TDS when making disclosure. That form is all that is required by law. But because it's so incomplete and because it doesn't remind you to think about certain things, we created the AVID, which you now must use in every transaction you handle for us. And so most of you do your disclosures on an AVID. The problem arises, however, when you check the box on the TDS which says that the buyer should look to the AVID for your disclosures. If you do that, then the AVID becomes part of the TDS and as a result carries with it the right of rescission that comes from the TDS. Well, this week we had a transaction where the TDS was delivered on time, the box was checked, but the AVID wasn't delivered for 2 more weeks. By the time it was delivered, the buyer had no contingencies left, but they wanted out. And so by delivering the AVID late, that made the TDS late, gave the buyer a new 3-day right to rescind, and the buyer was able to get out. The bottom line here is please use the AVID, use it every time, but make sure you deliver it early in your transaction with the TDS because you don't want late delivery to extend the buyer's cancellation rights. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2, we sold a property that had a home theater in it. And in the middle of the transaction, the seller said to our agent that he wanted to take the chairs from the home theater. Our agent went to the contract, looked at paragraph 8, and saw that there's nothing mentioning chairs, there's nothing mentioning anything about home theaters, and these chairs were not attached. So by the definitions in the contract, the seller was entitled to take them with him. Our agent decided to be sure and asked me whether or not the seller could take them. I also looked at the contract and confirmed that they were allowed to be taken. But I then recommended that our agent talk to the buyer about it to make sure the buyer understood what was going to happen and didn't get surprised unpleasantly at close of escrow. Well, that conversation never happened. In fact, the chairs were still in the house at the final walkthrough, and they only left the day before close of escrow. When the buyer closes and sees there are no chairs, he's angry. His lawyer gets involved and starts making threats. So even though we legally did the right thing, we still had to deal with lawyers and we still had to deal with a dispute. Eventually, our agent ended up paying some money to make the buyer happy and let the buyer buy new chairs. Bottom line, doing the right thing legally is not the only thing you need to do. You need to manage expectations, make sure everybody knows what's going on so they're not surprised unpleasantly, because that results in disputes and legal problems that you want to avoid. The fight's not worth it. Do the right thing and make sure everybody knows how your transaction's going to go. Thanks a lot.